John Daly. So I'm not going to send my screenplay into him. So I read all about John Daly, and I read John Daly. He did Terminator, Platoon, Hoosiers, Last Emperor. He was a really great screenwriter. And John Daly, so James Cameron got his big break with Terminator with John Daly. And I read how James Cameron did it. He wrapped himself in aluminum foil, and when he was pitching the movie, he, like, you know, when they said, okay, John Daly's ready for you, he kicked open the door and he's like, oh, I'm the Terminator. And apparently John Daly laughed, and that's how the Terminator happened. And just coincidentally, in that story, Arnold was cast to be the cop, because back in when the Terminator came out, those movies, movie stars were not the bad guys. So that was really the first movie where a movie star was the bad guy. And John Daly said he was and he's an Englishman, and very proper, he passed away, but he's a very proper Englishman. And he said he was at a party once with Arnold, and he was looking up at this guy, and he's like, you're huge. And Arnold, Arnold said, I've always wanted to play, I want to play the Terminator. I don't want to be the cop, John Connor. And John Daly said, you are the Terminator, you need to play that. And he's like, yes. He's like, will you let me play the Terminator? And he said, yes, I'll let you. And he went to his agent and said, hey, I'm going to play the Terminator. And his agent said, if you do that, it'll be the death of your career. And Arnold fired his agent and went on to play the Terminator, and look what happened. He became governor of California and next president of Austria.
I did the neon for that movie.
You did what?
I did the neon for that movie.
You did?
Yeah, I lived in Hollywood, and I'm a master tube bender, and I did the neon for Terminator.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's great. That's very cool. Well, so that was a big movie. So when I read that story, and I wrote a script called The Marksman. And can you pull that up? Thank you. Sliding Home, The Marksman. And I thought it was oh, that's what I looked like 100 years ago. That's what I look like now. Photoshop, isn't that a great thing? So I wrote the script called The Marksman, and I thought, this is a really good script. I don't want to just send it in; it's going to get rejected, right? So I called. So John Daly worked for a company called Hemdale. So I called Hemdale, and this is how kind of the story went. So I call, and I'm like, they're all English over there, so I'm going to do a bad English accent. So like, hello Hemdale. You probably heard this story 100 times, right? And I'm like, John Daly, please. And they're like, hold, please. They put me up to the second floor. John Daly's office. I'm like, hi, it's Jay Schillinger for John Daly. Can I tell him, does he know why you're calling? I'm like, I've written a screenplay and I think he'll love it. They're like, oh, sorry, darling, John doesn't read screenplays. And they hang up on me. Right? So I'm like, okay, call back. Hello, Hemdale. John Daly's office, please. Hold, please. Put second floor. John Daly's office. Hi, it's Jay Schillinger for John Daly. Darling, can I tell him what it's regarding? And I'm like, I've written a screenplay, and they're like, same thing, right? And I said, wait, don't hang up on me. I'm like, look, I've written a really good screenplay, and I just think John would love it. And they're like, well, darling, you have to have an agent to send a screenplay in, and then they hang up on me. Okay, so now I'm angry. I call again. Hello, Hemdale. It's third time. I'm like, look, how do you not know that I haven't written the greatest screenplay in the world? I'm like, and here's what's going to happen. I'm going to see John Daly at a party one of these days. And I'm going to tell him after my movie's made that what's your name? And she's like, it's Robin. And I'm like, Robin, that you hung up on me and would not let me get through to John Daly. And he had the opportunity to make my movie, and he didn't because you, the gatekeeper, wouldn't let me. And I'm just kind of going, and she's like, hold, please. And she puts me on hold. And I'm like, oh. So I'm on hold, and I'm like, okay, when she comes back, I'm just going to, I'm all fired up. So I'm, that terrible hold music. So I'm on hold for about 2 minutes, and all of a sudden, she comes back. John Daly speaking. And I was like, oh. I was like, I've written a great screenplay and I want you to read it. And he's like, good God, man, surely you can do better than that. And I was like, I was just lost. I was like, I've written a really good screenplay. And he's like, can you be here in 5 minutes? And so I said yes. So, and this is Greg, my friend Greg. Greg works at Walt Disney Pictures. Greg's a great writer too. So Greg, I worked with Greg, and I was in the Disney Channel building at that time, so I had to go over, if any of you are familiar with Hollywood, I had to go like over, what is that, Cahuenga, right? and then go down, and then he was on Melrose. So I had to, like, so I got in my little Toyota Tercel and I drove the hill. You know, he wanted me to be like 15 minutes, and then I remember that story about how James Cameron wrapped himself in aluminum foil, right? And I'm like, dang it, I don't have anything. What should I do? I had written a baseball movie. I'm like, should I stop at a little store, get a whatever? So I got in, you know, ran up, had my screenplay. Went up to the second floor, I saw Robin, and I was like, I've been American. And I also read in this article that John Daly, if he was trying to impress you, he won 2 Academy Awards, right? And which, you know, so to think about that, he won Best Picture for Platoon and The Last Emperor. And to put that in perspective, I mean, I don't know that Walt Disney Studios has ever won Best Picture for an Oscar. I don't know if they have. I mean, I know Miramax has, and they won it for animation. But you know, so John Daly won it 2 years in a row as an independent filmmaker, which we all are up here, right? So it was very impressive. So anyway, so I heard if he's trying to impress you, he's going to have his Academy Awards out. So I'm sitting in the lobby, all of a sudden, you know, I go in to meet him, and there's no Academy Awards out. He wasn't trying to impress me. But based on that meeting, he said, this is literally how the meeting went. He said, what have you got? And I said, oh, it's a screenplay called The Marksman. And he said, what's it about? I said, well, it's about a baseball player who gets kicked out of the big leagues, comes back to a small town, and it's a reuniting story between a father and a son and his lost girlfriend. He's like, okay, leave it here. I'll read it and I'll get back to you. That was the meeting, right? I'm like, okay. So I leave the script, go back, drive over the, you know, and I'm sitting at my desk, and that was like at 10 a.m. and at 3 p.m. phone rings. It's John Daly, and he said, Jay, I need you to FedEx this script to a place in Boston and then over to London. So I had to send it to 2 places. And he's giving me, again, pre-internet, so I had to write down the address. And he's telling me the address. And right before I hang up, I'm like, can I just ask why I'm doing this? He's like, oh, yeah, I want to make the movie. I was like, that was it. I was like, wow, I made it, right? And so I sent the script off. About 2 months later, we're shooting it in Palm Springs. And we're out there shooting the movie, and we're doing all our kind of B-roll stuff. And at about 4 p.m., a guy comes out and he said, "Hey, Hemdale just went bankrupt. Your movie's done." And literally, everyone walks off, and I'm standing there, and everyone was gone. It was like, that was it. But based on that bad story, I raised some money and made it on my own and did the whole independent thing. So, and yeah, so that's the movie. We had Martha Byrne. She is from As the World Turns. And we had the guy from Dallas, Steve Canale, Marty Cove, if you remember Sensei from The Karate Kid. So, you know, we just made an independent movie, and then based on that, that's kind of kickstarted my independent film career. But the point is, you know, that was a process of just writing a whole bunch of screenplays and just not accepting failure, right? Because people were saying you just can't, you know, had I just sent that into 100 places, I would have got 100 rejection letters. But we're going to tell you ways to get around that too. But first, I want to hear from you guys. Hello.
Hello.
You guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Michael.
I'm Kyle.
We are the director. Well, I'm the director, writer, and
Producer of God Forgive Us.
Cool.
we're screening today at 5 o'clock actually in here.
Awesome. I love all your titles. So, I want to hear how you guys did it. I mean, I want to hear your stories and just. But any questions? Remember, just feel free to shout it out. So I'm not very good at the format of screenplays. Can any of you guys kind of maybe just give a quick synopsis on how screenplays should be written? Anyone want to take a stab at that? Nicholas?
I would start by recommending a book that I read that was very helpful called How Not to Write a Screenplay. I don't recall the name of the author, but it's a great title, How Not to Write a Screenplay. That had just a lot of tips and tricks. It's not a beginner's guide. It doesn't tell you how to write a screenplay, but it does give you a lot of examples of things to avoid and some good pointers, including formatting. In terms of formatting, getting good software, there's Caltex, there's Final Draft, there's lots of good software out there. I'm sure my compatriots up here can recommend some as well. Those are easy to find and definitely worth buying or renting or whatever you need to do. But one thing I want to put down here is between discussing the process of screenplay writing, why we write screenplays, what we do with them, versus getting an agent and getting it sold, getting it optioned. And that's something that a lot of people are interested in doing, but that's never been my emphasis. I've never had any interest in trying to sell it the way Jay was describing. I write screenplays because I want to make movies out of them, and I want to direct and produce. So that's something that you as screenwriters need to be clear about in your own minds about where you want to go with that. And sort of to that end, I want to join Jay in challenging this young lady here who says she's not a good writer. Write your stories and make your movies out of them. And if you build it, the audience will come. I guarantee you that. So that's a really, really key message I can't stress highly enough.
Who here has an agent? Raise your hand. Who here has a manager?
We do. We have an agent.
Oh, you guys, okay.
Yeah.
But still, it just goes to show, like, you
Oh, it's
don't-
way different now. You don't need
Yeah,
one. You definitely don't
an
need
agent.
one. Yeah.
It's more common than not to get a manager before you get an agent, if even then. But the way that the industry is going, clearly, anyone can make a film. And I think that's why we're up here.
I mean, basically, to get something sold, it's a lot easier to have, say, a manager or an agent.
Yeah.
But to get something made, I mean, it just takes yourself and a little bit of ambition and drive. And really, to become a better writer, you just write or to become a better director. Honestly, what I've learned is just you have to learn by doing it, just going out there and doing it. And it's easier to do it now than ever. I mean, films are being made on, well, not films, movies, I guess the difference, on iPhones, and really it just takes, you don't have to make an Academy Award-winning picture immediately. You just take your phone out and get a few friends and start making movies, and you'll start actually seeing your writing on screen. You'll actually start to really picture your writing and start to see what your good decisions are and what your bad ones are.
Yeah, this is the first year, actually, that every Academy-nominated film for Best Picture was shot on digital, on HD. So it wasn't shot on film anymore. So technically, there are no more films. They're just movies, right? And so, real quick, do you guys know what the difference between a manager and an agent is? And so managers manage your careers, right? And so in LA or New York, I mean, that's where you need kind of a manager and an agent. So you can't send a script into Disney or Warner Brothers or Universal without an agent. Agents are like lawyers. They're bonded. They take 10% of whatever you make. Everyone has an agent. Julie Roberts has an agent. Agents care about your money, right? They want to make you money. You say, I want to do, a slasher film, but I'm going to make $1 million. Agents like, yes, do it. Your managers manage your careers, and they're like, look, you shouldn't do this. It's not good for your career. They care more about you as a person. They're trying to mold you. Whereas agents are just about the money, right? But you have to have an agent to send a screenplay into one of those big studios. But these guys, so the difference between then a studio film and an independent film is, independents are basically, an independent film just means you don't have a studio attached to it. You don't have distribution attached at the end of it. You're going to make your movie. We all made our films and we didn't have distribution attached. We weren't going to get a 2,000 screen release. Those are studio films. We're all independent films. We make it and then we try to sell it. So traditionally, when you make a movie, the process goes like this. You'd make a movie, you would hope it would get, you'd go to Marcus Theaters here, in Wisconsin, we have Marcus. You would hope they would play on a Marcus screen. So like The Marksman, the movie I made, I was in like 50 screens. I played at AMC, I played at Market, it's really limited, right? And it's wherever I would call, I would set it up. The theaters would take 50% of the box office revenue, I would get the other 50%. I mean, that's the way it worked, and you just negotiate that. So you would play theatrical first, that's a theatrical run, right? And then after that, traditionally about 6 months after theatrical run, that's when you go into home video. And then 6 months after that, that's when a film will go into TV, right? And so back in the 90s, it would do that cycle. It would go theatrical, home video, TV, and then it would play international. But now, because of smart people like Greg, films play international and domestic at the same time, right? I mean, so we'll release a movie, at Disney, we release a movie here, and we release it all over the world at the same time. So, but that's pretty much the cycle. Theatrical, video, TV. And within that comes Netflix and all those other good things. But in our independent world, we can do whatever we want to do, right? And we're not going for, you know, at the Green Bay Film Fest, I mean, we're not going for the films that are going to play, you know, 2,000 screens. I mean, sure, we'll take it, but we're releasing it ourselves, and that's, you know, Netflix, Walmart Video, you know, whatever we can. I mean, let's just talk about that a little bit. I mean, so what's the process? Can you tell me your process?
Sure. Well, I kind of wanted to like have a package and create a role for myself. So I wanted to immediately shoot whatever I was going to write. So we kind of pushed to make it a pilot episode, and then we had kind of like an entire show Bible to kind of have as a package to, you know, try and get representation and try and get it out there and, you know, try and get a deal off of something. But what I learned is just to kind of keep making work, because then you can get into festivals, you can, you know, get people interested in kind of your voice and what you bring to the table as an artist. So yeah, but I mean, it's kind of, like you mentioned, it's, you know, there's a million ways to do it now. I have friends that made a web series that got picked up by like Venmo, you know, or YouTube. It's like everything is kind of instant now. So I think because there's, you know, things like Netflix, you can kind of make a short or, you know, a pilot or even like, you know, just like a sizzle reel for a movie and kind of get a lot of attention just because you have that kind of concrete thing to show for your writing or acting or, you know, even like starting out producing. So for us, we made a little pilot that we sent to a couple studios and, you know, doing the festival circuit, and eventually just kind of want to brand ourselves as like my production company, like what we have to say and our like tone.
Cool.
What's a sizzle reel?
Sizzle reel is like just kind of like the highlights. And so when we started out, I have a 28-minute pilot, and we had to kind of decide if we wanted to kind of just shoot the best or like, you know, bring that for like a network package, or if we wanted the whole thing. So now I've moved to working on a feature, and it's, you know, it's going to be like 90 minutes, and I, you know, my company can't afford to make that. So we're just going to take the best of the best, have like our network package in just a couple scenes, and kind of give like the tone, the idea, the humor, kind of like an extended trailer.
Before sending your films out, is there a process in protecting your film, protecting it from being stolen by whoever may read?
I recently had a student, I teach screenwriting at Vassar College and Bard College, and they sent me an email asking me, I'm going to meet with this Disney exec, how do I do it? How do I protect my material? Legally speaking, the minute you create something, it's copyrighted, regardless of whether, you know. What you see a lot of times is people will register the script with the WGA. You just go to WGA East or WGA West. You can go to either. There's no real difference except for geographically speaking.
And that's Writers Guild.
Yeah, Writers Guild of America. I think the website's something like WGAEast.org or something. You can, you know, that legally doesn't protect you, but it does serve as a, you know, historic piece of evidence that this work was created by this date.
Did you send them a copy of that, or just a synopsis outline?
Just go online and it'll tell you, but you need to send in the full script. And then they'll, you know, and then you pay the 50, 80 bucks, whatever it is, and they send you back this pretty little certificate. Now, for a little more legal heft behind registration, you want to register directly with the U.S. Copyright Office.
Okay. Just like a song or anything else.
Exactly. You know, back in my slightly more paranoid days, I did both.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't do either.
I don't either.
Because you realize at this point that, you know, you see there's a few horror stories out there. Like, for instance, if you want to read something a little scary, just research the script for Gravity and the history of that. And that has more to do with, you know, allegedly the story being stolen from a novel. But anyways, you can read that on your own. But the fact of the matter is that even if you know, an idea is not protected. You know, if you can go to Disney, you can go anywhere and pitch an idea, and they can turn around and make the film and ignore you. The only thing that's protected is the execution of an idea. But again, you know, the industry is relatively small, and if someone gets some sort of notoriety for going around and trying to steal everyone's ideas, you know, there's a way of kind of self-governance that happens. So
I just have a comment about that. I mean, I would totally agree about the idea of, you know, not that many people are really out there to steal other people's ideas. I mean, there are a handful of people out there. But I would actually say, in terms of usefulness for WGA and copyright, Kyle and I have actually found it to be somewhat of a prerequisite with some agents, and
Yeah.
especially talent agents.
Yeah.
Talent agents will not look at something if it's not WGA approved. If you cannot, if it's not already on there, but say they read the first couple pages and they're like, okay, we want to keep reading. They're gonna say, where's the WGA number of this? And if you can't send it, they're gonna be like, all right, sorry, maybe next time.
When you say approved by WGA, what does that mean? You just merely sent it in, or
There's
they?
just a process for them to
Okay.
review and send it
So
back.
it's
Yeah.
not like a critique that they
Right, they don't-
approve
yeah.
you.
Right. And
Just
I mean,
registered.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
registered. Okay.
And but we've found in our experiences that it's kind of like if you can spare a couple bucks, copyright and WGA, it isn't the worst thing in the world. You
No,
know?
not at all.
And especially when you're getting it in front of somebody like that who sees so many scripts and maybe one day decides they want to go write their own script, and it just is just for sake of
You'll sleep better at night.
Yeah.
At the very least.
Peace
Yeah,
of mind, yeah.
right.
And you'll be out
Photographer,
30
I get my
bucks.
stuff stolen all the time. Always.
Yeah.
It's all the time, and it's.
But you guys, so the big companies like a Universal or Warner's, they just don't want to be sued, right? So they don't want to steal something. They're not in that business. Now, I might steal it, or right? I mean, but the point is, like I always say, I'll tell anyone any idea, because I'm like, if you can make that movie faster than I can, God bless you, man, because it's it's a process, right? I mean, the movie making thing is hard, and I'm not going to have an idea that great that you're going to be like, I got to do that. So, but I would say at the least, protect it. What you can do is also you can mail it to yourself. Was that certified mail? And stamp it. I mean, you could do, so just, protect it in a way you can. But Writers Guild makes it a little more legit, yeah.
How much of a screenplay is actually, script, and how much is actually just art direction? You're kind of laying the scene, you're almost writing a little story that's not even script. And the reason I say that is how much is ad-libbed or improvised by actors. It seems like some of the most beloved films of all time. I look at Whiplash, for example, hardly any dialogue at some of the most exciting parts of the film. That almost seems like magic. How does that really happen for a screenplay writer? I mean, they can write up the thesis and the idea, but by the time it all comes together in this big magical formula, how can you predict that?
If you read, sorry.
Well, no, go ahead. I want to follow up when you're done.
If you go online and search Whiplash PDF, and you'll be able to find the screenplay somewhere. Download it, read it, and it's really masterful the way that Damien Chazelle wrote it. And if you read it, it's really beat by beat. I mean, even that opening scene, he really captures the rhythm of the drums, like getting faster and faster. And so in the action writing of the screenplay, he has, not every shot, but it almost feels as if every shot that ends up on screen is there on the page. So it's really, in that case, it feels like much more than a blueprint of the final story. Obviously, there's differences. And the difference also being, he wrote and directed it, so he had the luxury to maintain, the integrity of everything that was on the page. But I'll let Chris jump in.
I want to echo what he said, that new screenwriters often make the mistake of making their screenplays very, very dialogue heavy and making everything about the dialogue. And while dialogue is important, whole movies have been made without dialogue. I could talk for hours about just that subject, but based on what he's describing, I would second that and say find Whiplash and do that. The book I mentioned before, How Not to Write a Screenplay, has an example of another film, the Tom Cruise movie, I can't remember which one it is, but that has this very long action sequence, and it's in the screenplay, and it's an excellent example of how to write action sequences in the screenplay, how to embed that in the screenplay. Remember, one of the limits of being a screenwriter is, if you write a novel or a short story or a poem, that is the product. That is what people see. When you write a screenplay, it's a tool, and it will be forgotten. And speaking as a screenwriter and as a filmmaker, the screenplay that I wrote, this jewel that I had crafted over a long period of time, became suddenly just like something that I referred to during the shooting process. The movie was the thing, and so writing a screenplay with the thought that this then will become a movie is. And writing something that will lend itself well to being a movie is a real art, but one that really should be mastered.
And I do think it depends on the writer too. Like I'm a horror movie guy, so I listen to a lot of interviews and stuff. And Cabin in the Woods, which came out a couple years ago, written by Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon, who now does the Avengers, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Firefly, all that stuff. For those that have seen the movie, towards the end of it, mass chaos ensues. There's all these creatures contained in these cells, and it's like a 10-minute sequence where they just go ballistic and rip everyone up. In an interview, Joss Whedon said that whole scene was described in one sentence. It said, "The doors open, chaos ensues." And then he said, he was just like, that fucking line made us shoot for 6 weeks. Like, that was a 6-week process to plan that out, to create everything, and shoot it. So I think it also depends on the writer. Sometimes it will just be simply, guy walks in the room. Other times it could be 3 sentences that describe what that room is like. So it depends on the writer.
I would actually have to say that my experiences are a lot more like yours, because that's the kind of the beauty of directing is you are the one, the director's the one that gets to decide, am I going to take this one sentence and make it one shot, or am I going to make it a 10-minute sequence,
Right.
you know, that's extremely over elaborate and everything. And that's why, I mean, I feel like there used to be these very, very strict rules to screenwriting, like don't put any emotion in, you know, in description. But I guess, you know, if the director's writing it, then does it really matter? I mean, it really doesn't change much, especially if the director and the producer are on the same page from the get-go. It's a little bit different when you're a screenwriter that gets a script, you know, bought for another director who is not familiar with the basis of the material, and yeah.
I was, you know, you're talking about it depends on the writer. You know, you might have this great script and all these amazing actors that might be completely capable of ad-libbing beyond belief. I think of a movie like PCU with the young Jeremy Piven and David Spade and Jon Favreau, these great actors and writers, and not one line in that movie was added because the writer wouldn't let it. And Jon Favreau was going to his office every day, like, can you put this in? This would be great, can you put this in? But you know, nothing made it in. So yeah, to your point, I think a lot of it does depend on that writer and how much leeway he's giving the director or the
Yeah.
One thing I have noticed, and it's a little bit more in comedy than I think, you know, drama or anything else like that, but I've ever, you know, Parks and Rec just wrapped up, Community, a lot of TV shows especially, there's a lot more freedom for talent where they literally look at them and just say something here, and then they say it and it sticks, and some of the lines are some of the funniest that the show has ever seen, just because they let the characters kind of create themselves. And I think that, you know, there are just different types of things that are made. There are writers who literally just like, oh, every line means something, and then there are other stories that are, you know, where you literally write the atmosphere and then you put them in the situation, and it's at that point that the writer, director, or the actor decides exactly what's going to happen.
So I'll tell you a real quick story about a friend of ours, and I'll tell you his name at the end. But so a buddy of mine worked I worked at Walt Disney for a few years, and his name was Bill Kelly. And Bill had written a screenplay called Looking for Eve. And Bill was an awesome guy. He was a single dad raising his son on his own. And I love this story. So he came into my my office in the morning and he said, hey, I have to move back to Chicago. I can't make it out here. He worked at Disney Character Voices, and he was a great writer, just a great writer. And I was like, oh, you know, it stinks, man. Why? And he's like, I just can't survive out here. I'm not making it. It's hard to raise my son on my own. I gotta move back. He's like, but that's not why I'm here. He's like, my car broke down. Can you, after work, take me home? And I said, you know, sure. But I'm like, just, man, you know, don't do anything rash. He's like, nope, I made my decision. So I said, okay. So I went to lunch, came back. After lunch, he walks in my office, he closes the door. He's got this big grin on his face, and he's like, I sold a screenplay. Now, I had sold a screenplay. Remember I told you earlier, right? By the way, that screenplay sold for $25,000. That's how much money I made on that screenplay. So Bill came in, he's like, I sold a screenplay. And I was like, wow, congratulations. He's like, no. Because he was thinking, what I was thinking, 25. He's like, no, I sold a screenplay. He's like, I sold it to Reginald Productions, which was Gina Davis and Reggie Harlan, whatever. And he's like, I'm quitting. I'm buying a house. I'm buying a new car. Like, and I was like, whoa. And his script, Looking for Eve, got changed and they called it, okay, so it sold. So the next day it came out in the trades, in the Variety. And so Bill Kelly was the writer. And can you look this up? Who's the director on Blast? So the movie is called Blast from the Past. They changed the name from Blast from the Past. And it starred Brendan Fraser and Alicia Silverstone, right? And so that movie came out. So when they announced it in the trades, I think Wilson or some was the director. It came out in the trades the next day. It said, Reginald Productions buys Blast from the Past, written by Wilson, whatever his name was. Yeah, Hugh Wilson, right? So it said, written by Hugh Wilson. And Bill, so don't click on him yet, don't click on Bill yet. So Bill had to actually, they had to threaten to sue to say, you have to say I wrote it, because, so the thing is, like out in LA, they want to get rid of the, I remember there's a famous saying that the screenwriter is the most important part of the movie making process. A director said this, I think it was Hitchcock said, the screenwriter is the most important part of the screenwriting, the movie making process, and we must do everything in our power to never let them know that. Because to whosever point, you know, I mean, what we were talking about, they don't want the writer there because the writer might say chaos ensues and he might mean this, but the director has this vision, you know, anyway. So this movie came out, it came out in the trades and it said written by Hugh Wilson. And they had to almost threaten to sue to say, no, you have to at least say, I wrote it for Bill Kelly. So Bill wrote Blast from the Past and went on to, it was #1. So he, it was very cool. So then he left Disney and he was doing what writers do. You know, there's very few writers like Bill Kelly out there that can just make a living. So he was doing rewrites. So you would sell a script and it goes to, you know, Universal buys it. And then the first thing they want to do is get rid of the writer, and then they bring in all these rewriters. So Bill was a rewriter. And he told this story, which was really great. So the day he was going to move back to Chicago because he couldn't survive, this happened. And we were having lunch with him a few months later, and he said, I got to tell you this crazy story. He said, I got asked, my agent called, and he said, hey, Disney wants you to do a rewrite of Stretch Armstrong. And he said, I can't do it, I'm really busy. I got 3 scripts I'm rewriting. And, you know, for others, he's like, can you just tell him I'm busy? He's like, I think you should just take the meeting. And Bill said, okay, I'll take the meeting, but I can't do it, I'm busy. And he said, okay, but just take the meeting. So Bill took the meeting. He said, this is how the meeting went. I said, I can't do it, I'm really busy. They said, well, we want to pay you $75,000 to write this. You have 6 weeks to rewrite it. He said, I'd love to, but I can't, I'm really busy. They said, okay, we'll pay you $100,000. And he said, I'm not playing a game, I just can't do this. I got 3 scripts, I'm really busy. They said, okay, we'll pay you $125,000. He said, okay. So he did it. He's like, in that 10 seconds, that $50,000, he's like, that was more than I was making in my, you know, where I was working. He's like, it was crazy. So he wrote, okay, so then Bill went on, so now Bill was a very successful writer, had a movie out #1. He wrote a movie, and that movie got bought by Disney, I think, and then they, you know, they bought it for, and they optioned it, you know, they get it for a year, right? And then year came and it went, and so they went in turnaround. So then Warner's bought it, then went in turnaround. So this thing happened for like 7 years. He wrote this script, and it kept going from studio to studio to studio to studio, and no one would make his movie. And then finally, he actually heard that Disney, 7 years later, optioned his same script back. And it had been rewritten everywhere it went. It had a rewriter on it, right? And his script got rewritten. So he called Disney and he said, hey, can I have a shot at rewriting this script? My script. And they said, sure, why not? So he took the script. He said he took the script, he read it. He's like, it was awful. They just changed, it wasn't even my story at all. He put it in a drawer. He said they gave him like 6 weeks. 6 weeks later, he said he opened up the other drawer and pulled out his original script and handed it back in, and they said, brilliant, we love it, this is great. So can you click on that? So that movie that Bill wrote, and then 7 years later, this is
Which
timing.
movie?
Just click on Bill,
Okay.
his big movie. Sorry, that was all supposed to be timed.
I'm sorry.
I know, that was my fault.
Blew it.
You said give you 2 minutes, I didn't give you 2 minutes. Who knows what movie that was?
And
Any captures?
Oh, hi, Linda.
Any capture station.
Enchanted.
Enchanted.
What?
Right? I mean, and in between, you've done other movies. So that movie, so writer Bill Kelly, right? That movie took 7 years and went through this whole hubbubaloo of crap before it got made. And that was from Bill Kelly. He was a great, so the point is, like, these guys, what these guys are doing, I love. They're not letting that happen, right? They're writing their stuff and they're making it, and they're kind of creating their own journey, and I mean, Bill, I think he made $10 million on that movie or something, so that's, there's that. But, filmmaking is it's the greatest journey in the world, right? And screenwriting, to me, is the greatest part of movie making. And, so I disagree with, you can say we can get rid of the screenwriting, but there is nothing better to me than staring at a blank piece of paper, and starting, right? Fade in. I love that, man. That's the biggest rush in the world to me, is writing. Yep.
So for all of you out there, I'm just curious, because you're all screenplay writers, and directors and actors and all that, but what do you do for a full-time job? Or I mean, how do you support yourselves?
I bartend. I bartend, and that actually led to what I started writing, because I had all these stories from, over the years working in fine dining and happy hours or sports bars, and I wanted to kind of make that into a TV show. And so, I tend bar for a couple places in Manhattan.
I write software for a company that sells stuff.
I'm an office coordinator for an oncologist.
I got a rich girlfriend. Kidding, I'm a handyman.
I work for the state government.
I work in a comic book shop.
Oh,
I'm retired.
Quick.
I teach screenwriting at Vassar and Bard.
And where?
Vassar College and Bard College, both in New York.
I actually am an animator. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I bartend.
what up?
I'm a wine distributor.
Nice. I mean, I think that's just what you see more and more, and just with the rise of the multi-hyphenate, those writers who are lucky have other jobs in the industry, at least, that can pay until they become the Bill Kelly.
I think it's important though too. I mean, don't get me wrong, I definitely fantasize about the day I get to run out of the bar and be like, Molly's a free elf, and I don't have to do that anymore. But I think that you kind of need that as well to kind of be a well-rounded person, to kind of get just as many experiences as you can in in schools and offices, and just to kind of branch out and not just be by yourself in your living room. I think that definitely has influenced my writing. And
There's a little bit of a particular drive when you go to work every day and think, oh my God, if I have to do this for the rest of my life,
yeah, pushes you.
I better succeed sometime soon,
Yeah, but in my case, I didn't start doing anything with this until I was in my 40s, and during that time I'd been a Peace Corps volunteer, and I'd worked in a couple of different careers, and I got married and got divorced, and went through a lot of ups and downs, and I don't think that would make me the filmmaker that I am right now without that kind of life experience.
Did you all have formal screenplay writing education or something?
Absolutely not.
No.
What's that? I do want to stress, I would be remiss if I don't mention this. I did join a local group in Madison, where I'm from, the Wisconsin Screenwriters Forum. And I recommend joining any kind of group like that, any kind of writing group, to get other people reading your screenplays, you reading other people's screenplays, to give feedback, take criticism, get ready to take a lot of criticism. It'll be good for you, I promise. But I had a group of people that we met once a month and would share each other's screenplays, and we would meet in a bar and give each other feedback on what we'd written. And that scrutiny made my movie so much better in the end over the course of a year.
I think that's extremely critical, is to have somebody that you trust, that you can share your screenplay with is going to give you honest feedback. I could go and show it to my wife, and she'll read it. She'll, oh, it's great, I love it, and it seems fantastic. And I go turn it in, and everybody's like, "What the hell are you doing?" But if you have somebody that's going to be completely open and honest with you, and you're receptive to that feedback, you can either change your screenplay to somewhat appeal to what they're telling you, or you can leave it as is. It's your piece of work. So you determine what's going to make it in and what's not. But I can tell you that somebody constantly telling you how great your work is not going to do you any good.
That's what moms are for. But nothing's going to teach you more than being part of a community of writers. And even if you live in the Galapagos Islands, go to like reddit.com/r/readmyscript. Go to the blacklist.com. There's Write to Reel. I mean, there's a million forums online where you can share work with other writers, and nothing's going to teach you more than doing that.
There's a feature that I'm in the works of right now. I'm becoming a screenwriter, and the way that I've done this is I found a friend who's composition 2 class, whatever. He decided to write a screenplay, and he's learning how to write a screenplay, and I told him my story, and together we're making my screenplay and his thesis. So grab onto somebody who's trying to use it as a graduating piece.
It's the scariest thing in the world is to have a bunch of people read your script. But if you ever do that, sit at a round table and have 10 people that aren't acting, see how they read a line that you've written. And when sometimes they'll laugh when you're like, that wasn't even meant to be funny.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's the worst.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I wrote a script that someone thought was a comedy and it wasn't. But you do that. It's a scary process, but right, take criticism. Fail, and just keep trying. Yep.
Does it seem like the ideas for your films or screenplays come from just real life experience? They always say that about writers, go out and experience life first, and then you can write about it really, in detail. But is that most the direction for any inspiration for most of the screenwriters out there? Or is it somehow able to say, oh, I know this about history, and I'm going to do a ton of research on it and then make the best, Egyptian film ever or something like that?
Well, I'd say from my experience, I feel like, it's kind of split even keel. I've met a lot of writers who are a little bit more like me, where I can't write something unless I have some sort of personal touch to it. It's affected my life somehow. I've gone through it. I know someone who's gone through it. There's got to be, I think, a level of emotional intimacy between the writer and the topic to really create, at least for me, to at the end be like, this is a piece of art. This isn't work, this is a piece of art, And I guess hypothetically I could write something, and someone wants to write me a check, I'll write whatever you want, but it's not going to be the same, And so kind of what you're saying, I in my personal experiences, there's got to be some relatability. The themes or subtext of the script have to have some relation.
Amongst my students, I teach at Vassar College, where it's rich, liberal arts, overachieving students. And then at Bard College, I teach at the Bard Prison Initiative. So I'm teaching screenwriting at state penitentiaries all around New York. And what I find, at least in my experience, is that the films that are most compelling, they're not strictly autobiographical, but they take place within a milieu or a subculture in which the writer is familiar with. So that it's kind of once removed, but they still have the expertise that someone would in a given field.
Yeah, Stephen King said he writes everything he's written about has happened to him. And you're like, so he just dreams, right? A little weirder than all the rest of us, right?
But your answer to that question, or your experience with that process is unique. I talked to a lot of screenwriters through that forum, and some people are very planned and really lay things out and get a structure together and then work it, and some people just get it onto the page, and for me, the story, this sounds kind of artsy-fartsy, but it's really true. The story finds me. Something will take hold of me, and I can't not write it because it just kind of wells up inside me. different people experience it different ways, and it's really a unique process.
That's cool. Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question about the process before you get to like typing, before you get to fade in. Like I've read Save the Can a couple times in some other books, and it's all, they talk about the process from like the log line, and you do the synopsis or your beat sheet, and this happens in 10 pages, 12 pages. I'm kind of curious how you guys interpret that, if you are familiar with it, and how it translates to like your films and how it translates to short films and stuff, and how important it is to have those certain actors here, all that.
Well, so I'll just go real quick with that, and then I'll let these guys talk. Because I'm not these guys. I mean, I think I watch movies that I love, and then I go back and read the scripts on them because I always want to see like how that translates, right? And I remember, so one of my favorite movies is Good Will Hunting. I just think that's just, it's maybe one of the best scripts I've ever. Rocky, Good Will Hunting, and Thelma and Louise. Those are my three, like, the best scripts I've ever read, right? And I heard Gus Van Sant speaking once about Good Will Hunting. He said he was sent that script, and, the rule of thumb used to be, so the rule of thumb in screenwriting is, it's a page a minute, right? So scripts are about 90 pages. That's a good script. That's a 90-minute movie. It's just general rules of thumb, right? Act 1 is 0 to 30. Act 2 is the middle part, and then Act 3. So you have your beginning, your middle, like, the girl gets abducted. That happens right away, and then, so within the first 10 pages, you should know what the script's about. I mean, I think if you're writing for, and again, it's different who you're writing for, but if you're writing for, you want to send it in, you got to understand people reading it read hundreds of scripts, right? So you got to catch them, kind of. So within the first 10 pages, I think you should know who, what, where, when, why, how. I feel like you should. I mean, sometimes you don't, but, and then, so Gus Van Sant was speaking, and he said when he was sent Good Will Hunting, he told the story, he was shooting a movie with Casey Affleck, and he's like, hey, you got to read the script my brother wrote, and sent it in, and he's like, I read the script and it was great, and then I went back, and like at page 30, it went into Act 2, and at page 60 was the midpoint. At page, he's like, and they had sent me the perfect script. And I thought that was really interesting to hear Gus Van Sant say that, because it was like, everything you hear about, like, oh, there's no rules and just right, but he was like, they're kind of our rules, and Good Will Hunting to him was the perfect script, and look what it went on to become. So I know there's, we don't want to say there's rules, but great stories follow us kind of, a format. And I think within that, your story will come out. I mean, if you have a great story, you don't want to, so Linda's here, and I know I read one of your earlier scripts, and Linda's a very nice person, right? And she's a great writer. But when she started out, and if you don't mind me saying, like, because she's so nice, like, she would introduce drama into her script, and she would resolve it a page later because she's a nice person, right? And because she didn't probably like the drama, like she felt bad writing, and then. But she had great stories, and she was a great storyteller. And once she like let that drama continue, and didn't resolve it till then the story changed dramatically, right? I mean, so I think sometimes you just gotta you gotta follow certain patterns, right? And but I'll let you guys go ahead. Yep.
Well, I was gonna say I've actually me and Kyle's film that's in the festival today. We could have done, I love Blake Schneider's beat sheet. I think that thing is awesome. But we kind of said, for God forgive us, we were just kind of like, screw it. I mean, some stories can be told that way, and some can't. And I mean, we have 2 projects in development, in financing with our agent out in LA, and one of them with the beat sheet, and one of them is just completely not. So I mean, it totally depends on your audience, your intent of the film, and but I mean, if you are going to go for a wide theatrical market, I mean, that is why the beat, that's why Blake Schneider's beat sheet is out there. It's a time-tested, formulaic way to structure and write scripts, and it catches the audience's attention, basically no matter what the niche is, and I mean, that's why it exists, in my opinion.
What can you explain what that is?
The Blake Schneider beat sheet? Okay, it's basically just, it breaks down the acts of a film even more specifically into beats. So for example, like page 1 is the opening image of the film, and according to theory, you want the opening image to have some sort of relation to the final image of the film. And basically, it's literally like a giant math problem where you can just fill in the blanks on what happens with your story, and they should follow a length rule. Like, the catalyst, which is the problem that begins in your story should never be past page 18. According to theory, because then you're pushing it too long. You might lose some of the audience. So but I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't let that keep you from writing a script, and don't also force a script into it. In my personal experience, but if you can make it work, do it.
Yeah, if your question is based solely on marketing your script, I would say there are films that are literally sold without a script, or at least optioned or given seed money, because the poster's cool and it develops an image and you have a log line and a synopsis. But if you're talking in terms of just creating something, just go write. You can always fill in the blanks later. If you don't have a feel for it right now, start writing, and maybe you start filling in the blanks as you go.
I think what these guys are saying is right on. Ideally, whether it's formulaic or not, you want to confound expectations. You want, by the end, to feel it, for the ending to feel inevitable, yet unexpected. And I think you want to see a lot of shifts in terms of the power dynamic within the film, so that it's things are moving up and down, regardless of whether it's a very minimalistic plot like Force Majeure. If you came out, if you've seen that, it's a brilliant film, and more than half of it is silent, but so much is going on underneath the surface, and you just see these power shifts, even though nothing's really happening on screen.
One great film I would recommend about the film industry, The Player. One thing I remember from that is that the most important part of a movie is that it have a happy ending. That's not all movies have happy endings, but the ending is critical. It really is. Whatever the ending is, it has to be a payoff of some sort. But even that is not a rule.
There's cool, I'll take a movie like Top Gun. You can say what you want about that movie, but when you guys remember the movie? Have you seen it? Right? You think about it, it's about this cocky pilot, why should you care? But in that opening scene, if you think about what happens, he's flying his plane, he's cocky, and then Cougar is in trouble, and Maverick is supposed to land the plane, right? But he doesn't. And remember, even Goose is like, come on, Mav, land the plane. He's like, no way, Cougar's in trouble. And instead of landing his plane, he goes back, and Goose is like, we're gonna crash, we don't have gas, we're running out of gas. And he's like, I'm not gonna leave this guy behind. And in that scene, the Maverick memory goes and he guides Cougar in and he saves his life. And in that little scene, what you realize is this cocky guy, Tom Cruise's character, will die for you, right? And every dude, I don't know how women feel about that, but I know as a guy, I was like, that's the guy I want to be friends with, right? At that moment, he can be as cocky as he wants because that guy's got my back. And that's what they showed, right? And we loved him. And then the rest of the movie, he was just this cocky jerk, but we loved him because you're like, he'd die for us. And so that one, you talk about beats, that beat in that movie solidified that was a great movie. And you go on to Rocky, right? Rocky's a thug. Rocky's a boxer, he's a thug. But remember in the opening scene, he's if you know what the very opening scene of Rocky is, it's a picture of Jesus on a cross, right? That's a very opening scene, and he did that purposefully. And then what does Rocky do? He breaks people's knees. He's a thug. But remember when he meets that girl, and he's walking home one day, and he sees that little girl, and she's smoking and swearing, and he takes a cigarette. He's like, you shouldn't smoke, and he says she shouldn't swear, and he's like, don't smoke, those things are going to kill you, And what you do in that scene is you see this guy's a thug, and he's a knee breaker, but he's a good guy, he's got a big heart, and you see that he's just doing that to survive, but he's really this awesome guy. And if you look at what Rocky, 17 or the last one he ever did, that little girl, the whole movie's about that little girl, Rocky 5. That little girl's the main character in that last one, and he talks about that scene that he, because at that moment you're like, okay, this guy's a thug, but he's a good guy, deep down. So I love beats. I think, when you watch every one of their stories, there's going to be like 1 or 2 or 3 of those moments where you're just like, you're staring at the screen and you're just mesmerized, right? That's what great movies do. That's what great writers do. They capture those, that's why he calls it the beat sheet. It's every story has those beats. Think of Good Will Hunting. Remember, it's you like apples? I don't know, I hope you know, right? Those great scenes where you're just, you can hear a pin drop. I love that, right? And that's what, kind of to your point, they come out, and I don't think you can, there's a saying in business. We were, this is Michelle and I worked together, and we were hearing a guy speak, this guy named Tony Hsieh, he's a billionaire, and he was talking about, in business, he's like, you can't, he encourages employees to get out and interact with each other. He calls them collisions. He's like, the best business ideas don't come in the office, they come when you're walking around, right? And you're at a coffee shop or something. And I would say the same thing's true for writing. I think, Molly, you said you can't write in your living room. Like for me, I loved, when I was in LA, I loved going to bars and listening to music, and then I would write. And you would see something happening over there, and you'd be like, oh, that's cool, because that's real life. So I think, that's the point. And, to her point, she's young. Is that your daughter?
Yes.
What's your name? Marissa. So you spoke up, so we're just going to keep mentioning it now the whole time. But, life is so big, right? And so there's so much out there, and I think the more you experience it, that's probably what, I bet hopefully you'll see all their films, and it's all probably a part of them in these films, and that's what's cool, really, about it. Any other questions? Anyone? Did I see a hand up before? All right, so I want to talk a little bit more. Could you just tell us your journey on this?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, so the short that is playing here is really the first thing I ever worked on. I went to film school, but I was like in the film studies department, which was more like critique and theory and history and that sort of thing.
What school?
At UW Milwaukee. They have a pretty solid film program, but it's very experimental and documentary based. So there's not a lot of like story talk. There's not a lot of like directing actors. There's not a lot of foundation of like narrative filmmaking that is good at that school. There's plenty of good things, but we could do better in that department. So I kind of went the other way and just learned more about like, why we watch movies, why we love movies, what do we love about movies, like how do we respond to artwork and that sort of thing. And so it didn't help me get a job or anything at college. So as I was working at one of my first full-time jobs, and I just was like, I went to school, I just want to do something, just that urge to just kind of get out there and have a camera on your shoulder and just run out and do something. Like that's such a powerful thing for a filmmaker to do. Like there's no better feeling in the world than stumbling upon a shot and just getting a great shot, and just looking at it later and just thinking like, man, that was so cool that happened. That wouldn't have happened 10 minutes before. It wouldn't happen 30 seconds after, And so I wanted to just do something, and I had friends that were just restless, like we just weren't working on projects, we weren't doing anything. And so I said, let's just do something. So I just wrote something, and then we just did it, and that's really all there was to it. And it's a hard step to take, but it's the most important one, and that's how anything really gets done, is just because someone started walking forward and people started following them. That's what I did.
Yeah, it's great. Doesn't it seem like if you would do it again, like you wouldn't create the same piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because of those magic moments.
Yeah, when I watch it now, I think of like, man, we didn't even use that scene. We spent 6 hours shooting. Like we cut the thing right away. So like you think of like, oh, I could have actually shot this in a day, but you don't find those moments that work unless you're doing all that stuff. And so. And you'll never, like, there's no two, I always thought it'd be fun to have, like, 4 different directors direct, like, the same script and just see what different ways you could tell that story. Because on the page, it's a story, but it turns into a film when you get a camera in front of it and you get color and that sort of thing. And that's unique to everyone will have a different version to tell. So if you're curious on how to start writing or something like that, I'd say because when people recommend reading scripts, you're almost always going to pick a script for a movie that you love. Find a script that you don't even know what the movie is. Like you've never heard of that movie. Find a script for a film you haven't seen. Find a script for a movie that hasn't been made, and just kind of see how you can visualize that, because that helps you when you're writing, because you understand like getting that image and how these words can evoke these images in a reader. Because the director is not the only person that's going to read the script. Actors are going to read the script. Production designers are going to read the script. Wardrobe people are going to read the script. And they all have to understand what needs to happen in order for this movie to work. And if you can write clearly to the point where we're all 6,000 people at the credits can understand, then that's a good script.
Yeah, and if you read a script and you find yourself, the images are just coming to mind for you. You're getting engaged in the story, as a member of the audience. That's a sign that the script is one that, at the very least, will sell. That's a script that's really well crafted in terms of engaging an audience, and it's easy to turn that into a movie.
So we have a novelist here. So what's the difference between writing a novel and writing a screenplay?
Novel, you have to describe everything. You have to get really in depth, and chaos ensues. For example, that example I said earlier. In a novel, well, what the hell? The director gets to decide what that means later. In a novel, you have to paint the entire picture in your reader's mind. So I was just talking to someone recently that was writing out a novel, and he's like, man, screenplays sound really hard. I'm like, no, like screenplays is like the lazy version of writing in a way. I mean, it's not lazy.
They make us look lazy.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's not lazy, but I'm just like, no, I wish I could write a novel because, man, the filmmaking process involves a lot of people. Then screenplay, novels, it's one person and a keyboard or pad and paper. But that's the main difference, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you're writing about this room in a screenplay, you kind of, you don't need to describe that there's a door there, there's a girl sitting there, she's wearing those shoes. But in a novel, you do, right? Because in a novel, you're not going to see it. But in a film, you got to let, we're going to see it. So you don't need to talk about it if you're going to see it, I guess. Right? Someone had, yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering, was there a movie or a book or something you read that it just gave you the impetus to go, I want to do that?
Ghostbusters.
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
I mean, I started out as an actor, and so I was on a couple of film sets of my friends, actually, that did like shorts. One was called Doorman, and it's kind of about like the inside world of a guy who's running the hotel or the front door of a really fancy hotel. And being on that set and being like around that, seeing him kind of go through that process made me kind of be like, well, I can do that. So.
I'm old enough to have seen Woody Allen's movie Sleeper when it was out in theaters originally. That is, in addition to being a real great work of art, in my opinion, that really it's made me say, God, I want to do that. I would love to do stuff like that.
I grew up in the early 70s, and my parents were very open to letting me stay up late and watch reruns of Kolchak the Night Stalker. And I also had seen the movie Psycho at a very young age, and nothing stands out in my mind more, even to this day, as Mrs. Bates turning around and having her be this shell of a skeleton, and Anthony Perkins running up behind her in woman's clothing. It's just ingrained in my psyche now. It's never going away. It's traumatized me since early childhood.
So what about animation? I just want to talk about that. How do you write different for animation? Or?
Yeah. Well, for animation, it's similar, but it's completely different because I don't do any writing. I do storyboards and I do sketches and life drawing, and I watch how people do things and do sketches of that, and I think of things that are funny visually, and I think of things that are visually stimulating, and I give mood with the composition of shots and using color and patterns and things like that. So it's.
Do you add dialogue at the bottom? Does it have a comic book like feel? Or?
Well, the film that I did doesn't have any.
But in the development process.
Yeah, you usually have little directions for what's going on, and you need to plan every single aspect of it. You can't just wing it. Like you
can't let the director decide.
Yeah, well, I was the director, but you have the storyboard and you turn it into an animatic and you time it, and then you plan your scenes and you know how many frames it's going to be because you know how many seconds it's going to be, and you try to stick to it and have key poses and draw all your backgrounds and everything. So chaos ensues. I have some chaos in my animation. I had to actually figure out what is chaos going to look like in this animation, and I have to draw all of it. So, yeah.
I would argue with one point that you made. I think what the storyboard process, that is a form of writing for the purpose of making a movie.
Yep.
It's totally writing. It's just not
the
using
hardest
words.
part.
He asked earlier, this gentleman over here, how do you take a script and turn it into this big movie? And storyboarding is where it's at, I believe. I think we missed the opportunity to properly answer that question.
Yeah, we have a friend here, a guy named Danny Wilson. He storyboarded a whole script called Nephilim, and he storyboarded he was the writer and the director, and he storyboarded every single frame of that. And he had financing and it fell through, and he wanted, it was a live action movie. We were actually in pre-production here, and then it fell through, and he was devastated. And then a company in India, based on his storyboard, bought it and basically just made an animated movie. So it's called Nephilim, and it's coming out. It's an animated movie because his storyboard was so great. I mean, he had every scene in there. So I think it's very important. I can't do it. It's very detailed. Hey, we have a few more minutes, so yeah. But.
Just one question about the animation again. For instance, if you're going to do, say, a Disney film, would you work from a script for that?
Yeah, it starts with the script, sort of,
Okay,
and then it storyboard and script together.
Okay.
So there's a whole pipeline for animation.
Okay. So you would work with the screenwriter in putting it together onto the storyboard.
Well, there's different processes. It depends on what my role would be. I know how to do, all of those things. Storyboard is one of the hardest parts.
Yeah.
Concept development and all of that.
Does anyone here use Dragon speak or anything like that when you're writing a screenplay? I know there's a great storyteller, but when I try to put it down in writing and typing, it just doesn't come across the same way. I think that, I don't know if that's laughable or not, if people are using that type of...
If you don't know, Dragon is a software program where you just speak into the computer and then it types it up for you.
Right.
That's like,
He has a dragon.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the
Game
Dragon
of Thrones.
speak. Naturally speaking. Does anyone use that, or you're all...
I don't, but I know a couple of people who do.
Okay, just wondering on that.
I know one screenwriter that he's like a Hollywood screenwriter, and he actually doesn't do any. He doesn't start off with the blank page and final draft or whatever screenwriting thing he does. He just scribbles just random things on on a notepad, and he's fortunate to have an assistant that he can give that to and type everything up. And then once that gets typed up, then he starts to kind of pick pick those parts together and kind of piece them together. And then from there he starts kind of generating interior blah blah blah, and then doing the scene breakdown and dialogue and stuff. But he just it starts as a soup, that just has alphabet soup, and then he has someone just kind of piece it together from there. And you don't have to hire someone to do that; you can do it yourself.
But if you can,
make your job lighter.
Do you have a question?
Well, I don't know if I can word it correctly. You know how, and I don't like these movies, but I know they're out there, but the movies that have human actors and then computer stuff.
Talking about something like Waking Life, where it's the animation on top of. Okay.
So does that have to do with animation, or is that totally out of what of this?
It totally depends on if it's a pure animation. So for example, a non-pure animation would be like Avatar, Scanner Darkly, films that are actually shot on digital cameras with live actors, and then as a post-production process, they go through an entirely different, it's not entirely different, but it's a full spectrum animation gig where they have animation directors, and the cinematographer becomes involved in post-production computer-generated imagery. And I mean, most cinematographers do tend to be involved with that, but they become very involved with it. It's like shooting two movies, because you have to shoot it and then you literally have to redesign the entire film in You're right, and it's, you know, anything, look at Avatar, that's like probably the best example out there, I mean, in my opinion, of that, just because of the scale of that production. I mean, what was it, like a $250 million film? And just what they did, I mean, they shot for months and months and months, and then they took it and then spent another like year in post-production before they even got to, you know, doing, you know, the composition and, you know, color correction and sound design. Just, I mean, just the basis of rebuilding this world that they had already spent probably, you know, a total of 2 to 2.5 years in pre-production, if not longer. But I know Avatar sat in development forever, so who knows how long it was actually in like pre-production for.
Do you have a question back there?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I have no interest. I transported Rico here this morning. I have no interest in movies and any of this.
Get out right now.
You're lucky.
But my question is, do you have goals for what you're doing? Do you see an end result as a writer, whatever you're doing?
Yeah, I think I would like to have a career similar to like Chelsea Peretti or Tracy Wigfield. The more notable women in comedy are like Mindy Kaling, Lena Dunham, where I want to have control over like a series that I can kind of write and act in, or maybe just write, however it kind of turns out.
I want my movies to make money and to live off of them. I mean, if I'm able to support my habit that way, I'm happy.
My goal is to entertain an audience. I would love to make money off them as well, but that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I love to do it. And I figure that if I do a really good job of entertaining an audience, the rest of that will fall into place eventually for me. So.
Yeah, I think it's a common thread. We just want to, it would be nice to be able to live doing what we're doing. I mean, it's not work. So.
I also, like, hopefully through the filmmaking process, I want to stay in Wisconsin. I want to show that you don't have to go to LA or New York to make films. I want to highlight Wisconsin talent and essentially just say, no matter what you're doing, if it's film, if it's music, if it's art, you can do whatever you want anywhere you want to do. Geography doesn't matter.
I like you.
Thank you.
So here's the thing. So this is over now, and hopefully you guys will join us if you can at our production seminar.
Sure.
I don't know when it is, but 11. 11? Okay, so it's in 45 minutes. But the beauty of a film festival is these are filmmakers and they're here, and if you have more questions, you can come up and ask them, and
Can I ask one last question?
you can.
I'm just curious if you're comfortable asking like how old you guys are, and then
How dare you!
Like you said, a screenwriter or a filmmaker, and then how long it took you to be our panel. From like when you knew like this is what I want to do, I want to write, I want to make films, and then now, if you would please.
Yeah.
We're over otherwise.
Want to kick it up?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
How old are you? And then how long have you been doing it?
31, and I knew I wanted to be an actor and work in film and all that other crap since I was 11 when I saw this crazy guy on TV, Ace Ventura. And I think when I was 20, I got punked by William Shatner on this movie called Invasion, Iowa. I thought I was in a movie, but they were just making the entire town of Riverside, Iowa, which is the future birthplace of Captain James T. Kirk. They were making us all look like a bunch of idiots, small town morons, because we didn't realize we were actually on a reality TV series. And so I got fed up with filmmaking at that point and revisited it when we had a tax incentive program in the state of Iowa for filmmaking. And I've just been doing lighting and acting and directing and crap like that ever since. And I call it crap, but I love it to death.
I'm 41. I've been doing acting and stunts and writing, directing for, I don't know, probably the past 10 years. So.
I turned 53 a week from today, and I started I made my first movie in 2008, so about 7 years.
I'm 28, and I've been acting since forever. I was probably like 4 in a Christmas pageant somewhere. But I wrote my first screenplay a year and a half ago.
I'm 27. I've loved movies forever, but I really started making movies just a couple of years ago, about 25, 24.
I'm 30, started making my first backyard movie when I was 9, and then my first film came out in 2007.
I'm 36 and I've been trying to do this for about 10 years.
I will be 33 tomorrow. I have been drawing my whole entire life, like literally, and I actually just decided to go into animation a couple of years ago.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm 24, and I've been doing this for since 2011, 2010?
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah, I've done about 3 short films, and the one here is our first feature.
I'm 23. I have been filming since I was probably like 15 or 16, but I've been writing for as long as I can remember. I don't really remember a time that I wasn't writing, so I wanted to be a novelist, and I wrote 4 novels before I was done with high school until I realized, oh wait, I don't really want to do this. I'd rather show people instead of tell people, so.
Cool. So the bottom line is, that's a really great question. These guys, they can't help it, right? This is just who you are, and whether it was when you were, a baby, or finally, it just came out of you, right? Writers write. So I would just encourage you, just keep writing and develop a network. You can always get people to read it, and I mean, writing's an incredible process. You really learn a lot about yourself, so I love it. So thank you. So at 11 o'clock, we're done now. At 11 o'clock, we'll reconvene here, right, Sydney?
Yes, if you're staying for the 11 o'clock and you want to keep your seat, just Emily over here, raise your hand. If you just give her your name, so we know you're attending the second session. Otherwise, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys.
I think I mentioned last year, but it was very brief.